Hi, you guys, and I'm here with a Sex Ed 101 class, the erogenous zones. I love talking about erogenous zones, but before we do,
don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I appreciate all of your support.
Erogenous zones, or E-spots, are one of my favorite things to talk about. Why? Because they're so specific to each individual that you encounter. No one's experiences with their erogenous zones, whether they be the same or similar to a previous play partner, will be experienced in the same light. Erogenous zones, or E-spots, they are areas that are very sensitive when stimulated. Also, because I'm a dom, this also gives me a challenge, a friendly challenge with my bottom / S type when it comes down to seeing how aroused I can get them through their E-spots, seeing if I can even bring them to an orgasmic climax through their E-spots. It's always different for each one, and it's such a journey to be able to explore with a partner. Out of the patriarchal thinking that all humans reach orgasms through their genitalia, that is not always the case. Some people reach orgasms through their nipple play or through their feet being massaged, aroused, and stimulated. Erogenous zones are great areas to explore even outside of the heteronormative penetrative sex. Erogenous zones can also bring us into those orgasmic blisses that we seek when we are engaging in those penetrative exchanges. Sometimes when you're engaging in erogenous zone pleasure, you don't even have to take your clothes off. And it doesn't even have to be sexual, and it doesn't even have to lead to intercourse. As I said before in my previous class, with regard to foreplay, erogenous zones are great areas to be able to explore foreplay, to be able to get you warmed up, get you lubricated, get you aroused and ready for intercourse. But it's not exclusively for that preparation of intercourse. You can just enjoy the foreplay of your erogenous zones and explore those erogenous zones with your partner, and that lead to you taking a nap afterwards, or it just may lead to you feeling pleasured and complete. When we focus only on penetrative sex, the heteronormative expectations of climax and orgasms, sometimes we value the human experience, because at the end of the day, it's not just about the genitalia. It's about pleasure. It's about bodily autonomy. It's about being able to explore and experiment different areas of your body that may give you a sense of pleasure that you've never experienced before, even through penetration. Exploring these erogenous zones can give you the opportunity to open the door to a much more healthier sense of vulnerability with your partner. You can explore things and let things go and feel a little bit more relaxed. Allowing your partner to know where your erogenous zones are and how you can be stimulated by them brings about a sense of trust and security. Breaking down these barriers and layers with healthy practices of foreplay through erogenous zones, or just intimacy and energy exchanges through exploring erogenous zones, as well as that healthy bag of vulnerability. It helps encourage people to be more expressive about what it is that they like and they don't like. In this particular class, we will be discussing different ways to explore erogenous zones regardless of gender. As cis women often reflect on pleasure from a vulvar and more feminine perspective. I will also discuss common misconceptions of the erogenous zones. I still can't be that spokesperson for the pleasure of erogenous zones through masculine or penile perspective. I don't have a penis, so I wouldn't know exactly how that erogenous area for a penis owner, how that feels, aside from, maybe when my clitoris is stimulated in certain ways. From here, I would like to discuss this from a more gender fluid and non-binary perspective. Often the talk of sex is more on a binary heteronormative perspective, but in my class, we're talking about non-gender conforming, gender fluidity, non-binary, all of that. We're talking about human experiences. I mean, we all know that masculinity and femininity fall on a spectrum. So that's not even the focus when it comes to erogenous zones. Erogenous zones are not specific to gender. They're specific to pleasure and areas that are sacred to an individual as a human. Common erogenous areas that are gender neutral are lips, neck, inner thighs, nipples, and feet. A great area to start when you'd like to take it slow. Starting with lips, this is a great area to explore whether for intercourse, outer course, or both. Not just talking about kissing. Some lips like to be grazed. Some lips like to be tugged, you know, grabbed by the teeth and tugged, or tugged with your fingers. But lips are a great area to start with. I also love a light lip graze against someone else's lips. Not necessarily a peck, but just a light tease and tintillating graze against the lips here. Honestly, I like my lips bitten a little bit, you know. Being that I have a full set of lips here up the top of my face, I'm sorry. Kissing can be the final form, but it doesn't have to be specific, and it doesn't have to be kissing at all. We can just do light grazes and light touches and massages and tugs.
You see where this is going?
These tugs and grazes may not be enjoyed by any and everyone. That is why we negotiate and we discuss what it is that we like and we don't like. Lips may not be on the table. Lips may be the main focus. We don't know until we have discussed what it is that we like, what we like about our lips, what we enjoy when our lips are being touched, caressed, kissed, nibbled, suckled. If we don't like those things, you know, we need to be able to create a space for us to discuss that. We can also use different forms of materials such as ice. Now, taking an ice cube and lightly grazing it against the lips gives a more cooling or cold sensation, which can cool those lips in preparation for placing them on other areas of the body. Sometimes lip nibbles and lip grazes may lead to tongue kisses, and that's okay, as long as that was consented and was previously negotiated and agreed to within people's boundaries and limits. Seduction of words and how gently and smooth they
form and flow out of the mouth
can also bring someone to arousal. So someone who is more visual like myself may be watching your mouth move as you're speaking to me in such a calm, sensual, and seducing manner. That may bring me upon arousal versus even the actual physical touch. Ice cubes can definitely heighten the sensation, especially when it comes to kissing. I can see grazing an ice cube against the lips, and then after that graze, you perform, you start making out. I can only imagine just how intense that experience can be. Incorporating other elements such as eye gazing when we are practicing different forms of pleasure through our lips can also create a much more intense experience. Now it's time to go in for the kiss. The kiss, after exploring various forms of sensations, may produce a much more intense exchange. And you can combine this kissing with other forms of foreplay, also creates a deeper connection, and incorporate other erogenous areas. Neck is a very popular area as well. Because it's so sensitive and has so many nerve endings running through it, it is such a very intense and very popular area for using your lips to be able to lightly graze, nibble, suckle, tug at the skin. Like I said, I love a heavy breathing against my neck, ear, and nape area here. Just light breathing or light grazes of the lips, or even ice cubes if they're willing to take that form of temperature play. Even hand massages along the neck and nape area can bring upon a very intense pleasure and sense of arousal. That nape and neck area has been a very notable place to explore with lips, hands, regardless of gender, and even tongue. Because the neck area has so many nerve endings to support your spinal and your back, the sensitivity level can be extremely heightened. The side of the neck and the jawline is another erogenous area. Even we're talking about the neck, but this is also a particular erogenous area, even specific to more masculine individuals. because they have their beards and facial hair. You can do a lot more massaging of that area, a more tug of the hair if they have facial hair, combing through it with your fingers. A lot of different forms of exchange through this particular jawline, neck area. You're enjoying breath play, whether you are having an asphyxiation experience. Subtle pressures of one's breath against someone's neck can bring about an intense reaction as well. Even subtle to intense kisses along the neck area and jawline and nape area. No matter what, start with the slow build. This is how we gauge our thresholds as well as gauge the intensity. And it helps the flow. It helps us flow into a much more vulnerable, comfortable, and sensual state. I was mentioning about the facial hair because we're not just talking about the beard anymore. We're also talking about those sideburns. Those sideburn areas can be stimulated, massaged, as well as caressed. I want to go too deep into breath play, but I do want to make a disclaimer that if you don't properly know how to perform breath play or asphyxiation play, choking, if you will, then I say avoid it at all costs until you have established a better experience with where placement of hand goes to a person's neck, as well as the intensity of the different types of choking. When we're talking about breath play, the bottom, the one who is receiving the breath play, the asphyxiation play, they should be aware of their surroundings and still have control over their autonomy, which means that you guys have got to discuss and negotiate what the safety protocols would be when you are performing this breath play. Because sometimes when we're performing breath play, you may not be able to speak correctly or loudly enough for your partner to understand you. So there are different safety protocols and measures that can be implemented when you are performing breath play. It's important that people are aware of all safety protocols, all risks. Breath play or choking does not always have to be practiced in an intense manner. You can do light breath play. Just holding the neck is a form of breath play, and being able to control the head just a little bit to exchange that power. If practiced unethically, it can become fatal. So I always tell people to please make sure you are aware of all safety protocols and all risks. Getting into the nipples being a gender fluid erogenous zone. Working our way down the body, y'all. Well, we started off with the lips, and then we made our way to the neck, and now we're on to the nipples. Now, mind you, like I said, this is a more genderless perspective, a gender fluid perspective. We're not on the binary spectrum or perspective when we are discussing these erogenous zones. So when I'm speaking about nipples, I'm not just talking about women's nipples. I'm talking about men's nipples too, or the non-binary nipples. It doesn't matter. Nipples are nipples. And the levels of sensitivity that certain people's nipples have can be very beneficial when it comes down to exploring pleasure and comfort and vulnerability when you are having that energy exchange, whether it be intercourse or outercourse or both. All nipples come in pairs. Most times they are individuals when it comes to them being stimulated, meaning when you're stimulating one nipple does not mean that the other nipple is experiencing that same stimulation that one nipple is. That's why they are within their own. Some people's nipples, one person's right nipple may be a little bit more sensitive than their left nipple. Hell, one nipple may not be as sensitive as the other. One nipple may not like a certain type of sensation like the other one. You know, your right nipple may like to be tugged and pulled, whereas your left nipple is like, no, I just like to be caressed a little bit. That's why they're their own individuals. People may have their nipples pierced. They may not have both. They may have one or the other, or they may have both. But that also, depending on each person, may heighten or lessen the sensation when it comes down to nipple stimulation. I would hope that when you got your nipples pierced that it actually heightened the stimulation. I mean, I got mine pierced, and I can be honest and say that when I get my nipples pulled, I feel a much more intense sensation. versus when my nipple rings are out. Nipples are not just the areola. That's not just the surface. Nipples are the actual nip of the breast or the chest area. So some people's nipples may be shorter or longer than others, but their areolas may be bigger or smaller than others. This is why we have those negotiation processes to have a better understanding and gander on what it is a person or how it is a person enjoys their nipple stimulation. And even if they enjoy it or not, some people don't even want their nipples touched. Negotiation process. Nipples can range in length, width, and sensitivity. They are their own individuals. I can't stress that enough. But each individual who has nipples experiences those stimulants and sensations very different as well. I also say that I do enjoy more nipple stimulation without my nipple rings, but I know that a much more intense experience for me is when they are in and when my nipples are pulled and tugged and bitten and sucked. Using a mouth to stimulate the nipples is a great way to incorporate both erogenous zones, the lips as well as the nipples. Also incorporate teeth and tongue when it comes to nipple stimulation. A nice tug and bite. Some people like their nipples bitten. Some people like a little tingle with the tongue. They like a little, flick of the nipple with the tongue, or they actually like their whole chest or nipple or areola licked or sucked or bitten. This particular sensation can become very otherworldly, meaning when someone puts their mouth onto your nipples, it may be an experience or a sensation that you have not been able to experience in any other parts of your body, which is why I was saying earlier that stimulants and pleasure should not just be centered and focused on the genitalia. That is not the only erogenous area that we should be focused on. There's so many other erogenous areas that can bring upon a orgasmic pleasure.
Girl, facts.
Ranges of stimulation can be from, light to intense, which is why it's important to discuss levels of limits and boundaries so we can know just how intense this nipple exchange can be. Nipples are commonly misconstrued and misconceived to be a sole place and sole focus for more feminine pleasure, when in actuality, there are more masculine people who enjoy nipple pleasure and nipple stimulation just as much as a feminine person as well, which is why I am trying to make sure that we focus on these areas, these erogenous areas, in a non-binary, genderless way. Nipples should only be sexualized consensually. That doesn't mean that just because a person has nipples and their nipples are big and they're poking out through the shirt and you can just see them fucking just there.
Okay.
Doesn't mean that they can be sexualized. Some people may want to avoid that area for their own particular reasons, but that is the reason why we, like I said, again, that we should negotiate. When you are playing and stimulating nipples, it's not to be just focused on the nipples because of a feminine presence. Understand that a masculine individual, a masculine human, can enjoy the same forms of stimulation that a feminine human would as well, which is why it's important to make sure that you discuss what it is that you enjoy, what you like, and what brings you those pleasures. The next area is the inner thigh. This particular area can make a person's toes curl. You hear me? The inner thigh is very sensitive. That inner thigh groin area, that thigh to groin ratio area, that crease where your legs are crossed in that groin area where your genitalia makes that V, that's a very sensitive area for certain people.
Okay, talk to me.
This is an area that is enticing, not only due to the location, but just the levels of intensity. I know that it's close to the groin, which means that it's close to the genitalia, which means that, you may be thinking that, oh, this person is biting all on my inner thigh. They're about to start putting their mouth on my genitalia. Doesn't necessarily have to even lead to that. But sometimes that thought process can even bring you upon a much more intense arousal too, knowing that you may be getting into that moment of intercourse, and it may lead to that moment of intercourse, but it doesn't have to exclusively be focused on the genitalia or intercourse. It can just be a moment of pleasure that is explored and experienced and enjoyed between two individuals who love inner thigh play. One of my favorite things to do with inner thighs is give hickeys. I love to suck and bite and nibble on the inner thigh. I love how intense it is. I also love to grab it with my nails. Sometimes people like that, some people don't. Discuss those things prior to in your negotiation process. Also make sure that before you put a hickey on someone that you have their consent to be able to do that. Hickeys leave markings that may last weeks to months. So that's why it's important to discuss what it is that a person is willing to accept and willing to receive and don't want, limits, boundaries, kinks, fetish, etc., etc. Light blows and breaths. And breaths and breathing along that inner thigh area can also be an intense experience. Also want to mention that temperature play can also be incorporated in this area as well. In any area of where there are erogenous zones, these different things can be incorporated. So even when I mentioned the nipples earlier, you can put some ice against the nipples. You can warm up a metal toy and put that toy against the nipples and bring about a whole different experience and sensation. The inner thigh is a great area for tease and denial. Because of how close it is to the genitalia, you can tease someone and have them thinking that you're going towards that genitalia area, but never actually get to it, and just stay focused on that inner thigh area. This incorporates a very intense buildup. This can also bring upon light kisses to intense bites when you're incorporating like the subtle to intense breathing when you are in between someone's thighs. Also important to check in with your lovers and your play partners to make sure that the level of intensity isn't overwhelming or overstimulating. If they've consented, maybe take it up a notch. Get a little bit more intense. Bite a little bit harder, suck a little bit harder, scratch a little bit deeper.
Damn, okay.
Grab a little bit firmer. See where these levels of intensity go, where they lead you. Does it lead you down a row of foreplay and intercourse, or does it lead you down that road of intercourse? Inner thigh is also a great area for doms and tops and sadists to be able to practice pain thresholds and levels of intensity as well. Let's talk about the feet. Feet are widely known to be fetishized by some of the most famous people, but feet are something that's still considered taboo in a vanilla world. I say my favorite for last. Just kidding. But no, not really kidding. I love one of my top 3 erogenous zones on my personal body, my personal autonomy, my personal persons are the feet. And the reason why is because depending on the areas of my feet and the intensity of the sensation can bring about an orgasmic climax for myself. Trust me, I've had it done before. In this case, when we're speaking about erogenous zones, it's more about the sensation that the receiver feels versus the emitter, which means that they can be extremely sensitive just to the touch or to the blow. Like all of the earlier E-spots that I've mentioned, feet have a lot of nerve endings. In this case, we're not necessarily discussing foot fetishes, we're discussing the person who receives it. I do feel like those who enjoy the pleasure of their feet being stimulated and aroused, or bring upon an arousal through foot stimulation and foot pleasure, is a form of a foot fetish, or a foot kink, but we're not necessarily divulging ourselves into foot fetishism right now. We're more so focused on the feet being a area of arousal or an erogenous zone. Like everything else, everyone's feet are specific to their own. Some people may be more ticklish when it comes down to their feet and don't like their feet touched at all. Some people don't want their feet touched at all because it's an overwhelming experience that brings them levels of uncomfort versus pleasure. People, like myself, enjoy shoving a foot down someone's throat and tickling their uvula with their toes. Others enjoy a foot massage here and there, depending on the levels of intensity. Of course, you previously discussed that prior to play, But foot massages can bring about very intense levels of pleasure, which may lead to other levels of intercourse, outer course, or just energy exchanges in general. From acupuncture to reflexology, just based on the levels of sensitivity that they have because of the amount of nerve endings that are within the feet, hold a very ancient history, also carry the weight of our entire bodies. So sometimes massages can just be all we need to kind of bring us into that relaxing and comforting state. Massages to toe sucking to arch nibbling to heel biting. I love it all. And I'm sure that people who enjoy their feet pleasure love certain aspects of that as well, if not all. People may even enjoy toe rotations, rotating those toes around and round, tugs, pulls, bends. Some people may enjoy those different forms of stimulation. Some people just may like and enjoy light kisses upon their toes, feet, heels, arches, and soles. Sights and sensations of that such can be stimulated and be a form of pleasure for those whose feet are an erogenous zone. You may come to find out that your partner may not even enjoy feet. They may not even want to touch your feet, which is why it is important to have that negotiation process and have an understanding of a person's limits and boundaries. So therefore, if your number one erogenous zones is feet stimulation and the partner that you're with is saying, I don't want your feet near me, there is some type of common ground that has to happen, or finding mutual erogenous zones that both can find pleasure in. Common misconception about feet is that pleasure only comes to those who enjoy a foot fetish, who enjoy worshiping them. Someone like me, I don't worship feet, but I love my feet worship, and there is so much pleasure in that for me. I personally receive a daily gesture of foot stimulation pretty much every day, and that will probably lessen my stress levels. I'm not gonna lie. Don't get it twisted. I am very specific on how I like my feet worshiped. I've mentioned different tactics and tips on how a foot can be stimulated versus, utilizing the toes, utilizing the heel, the sole, the arches. Any part in any area of the foot can be stimulated depending on if the person finds pleasure in that. And I've mentioned a few areas that are considered E-spots or erogenous zones. This is not specific to anybody. The list that I've given, I say that this is just a more genderless, gender fluid, non-binary perspective of being able to initiate different forms of foreplay, intercourse, outer course, etc., or just energy exchange upon amongst two play partners. Erogenous zones can intensely and significantly deepen the emotional connection between two play partners, regardless of gender, of course. And E-spots such as your neck, lips, feet, and nipple area are areas that are specific to you. You can be very sensitive and be very responsive to the touches and sensations that they experience. It's important to communicate with your partners about what feels good, as well as your boundaries, as well as safety protocols and levels of experience each of you have. As I mentioned earlier, we are all created individually, which means our perception and perspective of these particular erogenous zones will vary depending on each person. The pressures and sensations can also vary upon each individual, meaning if you have multiple play partners that enjoy feet pleasure, does not mean that all of them enjoy the pleasures of their feet the same. In reality, any part of the body can be considered an erogenous zone, as well as the attention and care that is put into those particular areas that are considered erogenous zones. Overcoming these misconceptions, embracing your partner's uniqueness, lead to a more fulfilling and connected relationship and dynamic. May your consensual journey be a good one. Happy kinking, you all, and thank you for tapping into my Sex Ed 101 focused on erogenous zones. Peace, y'all.